Hello and welcome back. This is the kickoff for me. It is October 1st, 2024. I'll even put a year on that. And we're kicking off spooky season, and I'm doing it in fashion. I am reviewing Gremlins. Yes. It's gonna be fun spooky season. I got a lot of stuff planned, a lot of needle drops in terms of horror movies for you guys. I've got some fun stuff planned with the use of darkness and flashlight and stuff like that. So I did this review just so I could welcome everybody to spooky season, the beginning of spooky season with this. We're in the 40th anniversary of Gremlins. I know I could do this also for Christmas, but I wanted to kick it off here. It's an easy kickoff. It's lightly of the season. It's accessible to everybody. It is also responsible for the PG-13 rating, but a couple films that came out around the same time period, Gremlins being one of them. Sort of the films that people were like, you know what, maybe we should try out that PG-13 rating, you know? So yeah, there were a couple of films that people pointed to as being, I don't know, is this PG or R? It kind of feels like it's both or none at all. Maybe there should be a new rating. So Steven Spielberg's actually producer on this, as are Frank Marshall and Kathleen Kennedy. And I did watch this with audio description, so that was great. It's directed by Joe Dante. And yeah, let's talk about Gremlins. I've got my purple baseball cap on backwards, black sunglasses, and to kick off today, I'm wearing a Gremlins t-shirt. And I've gotten it wet many times. It has never spawned a gremlin. So, in case you're wondering, that doesn't work. It seems to only happen to Gizmo when you get Gizmo wet. You have to get an actual Mogwai. You can't just have a gremlin themed product and get it wet to spawn gremlins. Famously, this project was once trying to be a part of the Walt Disney Animation Studios. I remember back when I still had sight, and I was really into like canceled projects. I got really into canceled projects with Disney right around the time that they canceled Newt, because I was like, what the? Newt looked awesome to me. Like, I was so on board for Newt. And then Fox beat them out with Rio, and I was like, come on, guys, Rio's not even, keep making Newt. You'll be fine. By the time Newt comes out, you know, but no, they were like, no, it's too similar to Rio. We can't do Newt anymore. And Newt, I mean, like the character art for Newt, he was adorable. Looked like he was going to make a great movie. I would love for somebody at Disney to revive that project at some point, realizing we're farther enough away from Rio that you could probably just bring Newt back and he'd be an original concept and not a franchise. Let's do it. But yeah, it started getting me into sort of all of those other projects that they had canceled along the way. They had sort of a Prince of Egypt-ish type musical, like an Egyptian type animation thing that they were trying to do. Kingdom of the Sun, I think it was called. Empire of the Sun. No, I think it's Kingdom of the Sun. That lived and died, but they also had this Roald Dahl Gremlins project, and there was concept art for it that you were able to look at online and see that they were, he really wanted it to happen. It just didn't happen. It never came to fruition. Would have taken Disney obviously in an interesting direction, because it wasn't, at the time he wanted to do it, they weren't really making anything like it. So, obviously the Black Cauldron pulled them in kind of a different direction, but not a good one. Nobody really fondly remembers the Black Cauldron, especially in terms of Disney's history. So there's like the Dark Ages. But here we've got all the grown-ups have decided to make Gremlins. and they have cast Zach Galligan as the lead Billy here. We've got Phoebe Cates, who made a stir in the 80s in a certain film, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, where, yeah, look it up. I don't want to explain it. It's not... If you're too young to know what that means, then good for you. And we and a bunch of other people are like coming in and out of this film. Howie Mandel is the voice of Gizmo, which one of those things is you can't really unknow. You're like, oh, that guy? All right. And Gizmo is adorable. And I think that's probably the one thing about the audio description is it's so hard to communicate all the different gremlins in their different ways. There was like striped gremlin, I think like acid gremlin. I'm trying to think of like all the different ones. They came up with like different ways of indicating them, but their character designs are so strong that going from having seen this cited to going to blind with audio description, there was a little bit of that, like, oh damn, I don't know how to do this. How's this working out? It's not really, because you don't see, and they're all kind of doing their crazy things. And in 1984, this wasn't like, they're not computer animated. You know what I'm saying? These aren't like minions. They're, like animatronic little puppets that they're using, like actual things that are standing there. And yes, Gizmo is adorable. And that was not put in the audio description, which it should be. And Gizmo, who is adorable, should be. That would have been my quality check. Would have been like, I feel like at some point we should just say Gizmo's adorable, because it's not something that we talk about enough. Because the other ones are not. But Gizmo is. Gizmo is the cutest thing you've ever seen in your life. And of course everybody would want a Gizmo. Like if Gizmo was the only thing, if there was just Gizmo, I feel like everybody would have a Gizmo, you know, if that was an actual creature that you could have, the Mogwai and everything looked like Gizmo, dude, they would be everywhere. That would be the hottest exotic pet in everybody's household, would be this little thing that like sings. Like, but the film kicks off with this guy who is being led by, I don't know, Short Round from... You can't tell me that this film probably existed without the little Asian kid until Steven Spielberg came in the film and he was like, no, this is this thing I'm doing right now in my movies. I'm going to put this little kid in here with a baseball cap and see if anybody catches the similarities between the two films. It's like, well, this is pretty close to the release of Temple of Doom, so not too far removed from the year of, and they're both Steven Spielberg projects, one way or another. Even though this one isn't directed by Steven Spielberg, I kind of feel like that's his influence that he exerted, was to be like, can I have a young Asian boy who's wearing a baseball cap, please, in the film? And they were like, why? Because he doesn't really serve a purpose. But I had totally forgotten about like this whole thing. For some reason, I rewrote a narrative in my head that like Billy went to the store and got the Mogwai and heard about the rules from the old man. Like in the version in my head, that's how it happened. And suddenly there's this guy who's this salesman who's going to an antique store. He's being led down there by this little Asian kid. I'm like, what movie am I watching right now? What movie is this? Like, I felt like it was in a different movie. I was like, is this Gremlins? I swear I clicked on Gremlins. Is this like a director's cut of Gremlins? Was this character always here? So I had totally forgotten he existed, and he's kind of an unforgettable character because he keeps trying to sell you this like useless crap. Like he's going to this store supposedly to buy something for his kid, and he starts off with this like narration at the top, and he goes to the store and he's looking around, he's looking at things, and then all of a sudden he notices Gizmo, and he's like, "Well, I have to have this, so $200." And the kid's like, "Wow, $200 for..." And this whole thing that none of this makes any sense to me, which is probably why my mind deleted it, because it's like $200 for that, man. Do you realize that that's probably like the only one that exists of its kind, and you're going to sell it for, even by like 1984 standards, that's not really that much money. Like I'm pretty certain, you know, there are more exotic pets that get sold for higher rates. I would have held out for more. Certainly, but that little kid is like, he's $100 blows him away. Like, how in dire straits are you as a family, like, for you to be excited by $100 for this rare fucking creature that has been hanging up in your grandfather's store this whole time, that you've probably gotten to know, is super adorable. Like, why are you so willing to give it away for $100? Is he near death? Like, is your store about to burn down? Like, what is happening? None of it makes any sense. Doesn't really matter. All we need to do is get him out of this old Asian antiquities place, and back on the road with the traveling salesman and his really dumb gadgets. He has some spiel every time he tries to sell somebody something, but you're like, all of these, they're dumb. Your ideas are stupid. And he takes the gift home for his son, and his son is played by Zach Galligan, Billy, who becomes the lead of the franchise. He's given 3 rules, and it's sort of like Fight Club, where pretty much the fans of the franchise already know the rules, and that's how you can tell if somebody has ever seen the movie before, because you're like, no, really, do you know what the rules are? All right. So, I think the rule that is always hotly debated about Gremlins, not to debate the other ones, because, like, don't get it wet, okay. The sunlight thing is less of a rule than it is like a caution, like, unless you want it to die, keep it out of direct sunlight. But the water thing is like, that's important. Don't get it wet because it'll spawn. The eating after midnight thing is always interesting, because it's like, but when do you start feeding it? Like, it's one of those rules that sounds really cool, like, don't eat before bed. What does that mean to you? Like, how many hours before? Like, sometimes people will say things to you and they're like, and you're like, but how much before? Everything is before bed. Like, once I wake up, the rest of the day is before I go to sleep. So, like, what does that mean? With what window of time? So, like, you can't eat after midnight. So, what's funny is I'm also going to have, for you guys who have made it this far, there's going to be a review for New Batch at the same time. I'm doing both films. And the second film pokes fun at this when they start talking about, like, well, what if there's food left in the teeth? But they technically started to eat it, before. But he has a little bit that's stuck in the tooth. And and he ends up eating that part after midnight. And it gets kind of stupid. Like, the third rule is dumb, is what I'm saying. The third rule is dumb, and it's written poorly. Like, it is written like, don't eat after. But when can we feed him again? 8 a.m., 7 a.m., 6 a.m., the sunrise? Like, is it just don't eat after dark? Like, 2 a.m.? Like, what is the window of time? Noon the next day? So, yeah, it doesn't really make much sense. but Billy, anyway, he inadvertently ends up having, obviously, he messes with the rules, and the rules just uh, end up failing, and which spawn the Gremlins, and the Gremlins start taking over the town, which makes the movie fun and sort of this quasi horror movie. It's not like, it's not gory, but it's, it's campy. It's fun, and it's the kind of thing that Joe Dante likes to direct. I'm kind of disappointed that Joe Dante's career like went to like just directing like random episodes of TV shows, and now he hosts a podcast, because you can tell that there's stuff in Joe Dante's filmography that suggests we should be giving him more movies to do. Just because he doesn't hit a home run every single time doesn't mean that there isn't something to Joe Dante. Um, so he does a very respectable job with Gremlins. It's an iconic film, and there's something to be said for that. Phoebe Cates's history, though, here is fucking dark, like really dark. Just like unreasonably dark, about like Christmas time and her father, and that story is just like, it's in the middle of this movie, and you're like, oh my god, I didn't even remember that as a kid. I was like, I would have been horrified. I'm sure it went over my head. I was like, I don't understand what's happening, because I definitely saw Gremlins young. I definitely was one of those people who saw Gremlins as a kid and was like, it's fine. I didn't get it. I didn't. Some of the jokes were over my head, but whatever, Corey Feldman's in this, but his character feels like it's not that important, despite the fact that Corey Feldman is arguably probably the bigger star here than Zach Galligan. But I think the original script had him in the film more. Like, it was supposed to be a trio, and he kind of gets pushed aside for the most part. Like, he's not as active to the plot as Phoebe Cates is, so he ends up becoming like, well, there's that guy. He's here. There's Pete. So, and some other people pop up. Glenn Turman, who was excellent last year in Rustin. I thought that was fun. I had no idea he was in Gremlins. Totally forgot. As a kid, an actor like Glenn Turman wouldn't stand out to you. You wouldn't be like, oh yeah, I need to remember him. But I did remember, of course, even as a kid, being like, I think I for a long time, I thought the same kid that was in Karate Kid was also in Gremlins. When I was young, I was like, yeah, it's the same guy. No, no, it's not. Zach just doesn't have a whole ton of personality, which is why his career never just popped off. He kind of has, the second film just kind of shows he doesn't get any better as an actor after 6 years of doing it. But Phoebe's interesting. She was an interesting like 80s actress. And of course, Corey Feldman, always just a great screen presence. Musician now. Yeah, so I like Gremlins. It's out there. It's something you can watch that is not too offensive for the kids. And it's the kind of film, too, that feels like you're knocking a classic off your list if you haven't seen it already, because it is. It's a classic. Is it perfect? No, it's not a perfect film, but it's one of those films that you just kind of excuse for not being perfect, because it's doing everything with like a wink and a smile. Like, everything is that campy, like, we know, okay, like, we know. We're not trying for the Oscars here. We're not shooting for Best Picture. We know we're goofy and a little bit creepy, and that's what we're going for. Is this sort of family-friendly, accessible horror movie? This is a great starter. If you're some parents just let their kids watch anything, which is such a mistake. Don't be that person. But Gremlins is such like an interesting starter point movie for your kids. Like, you start them with something like really simple, where it's like animated. Like, I don't know, Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, The Corpse Bride, Coraline. Coraline's a great one. It's like if your kids can make it through Coraline or like Spirited Away, they're probably fine. And then you translate that on Gremlins. It's like, can you do live action? Okay, so we'll move you up from there. Instead of just being like, here's Saw. Here's my 5-year-old kid and he's watching Saw. Yeah, we're getting throwing him in the deep end. Fuck nightmares. Yeah, so it's a gateway to greater things, and your kid could find a love of everything from, practical special effects to just simply wanting a lot of Mogwai crap in their life. So I don't know. I love the fact it was the 40th anniversary of Gremlins, and I knew that. And when I realized that, and plus I have a shirt. It's like, if I'm ever going to review Gremlins, it's going to be this year. Is it going to be for Christmas or is it going to be for Halloween? I was like, I'm going to kick off Halloween with Gremlins. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do the unexpected. So this is beginning of spooky season. This is Gremlins. It's a film that I have loved, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't buy a shirt for it for years. It's fun. I like it. It's goofy. It's silly. The second one is definitely goofier and sillier. So check out my review of that. Yeah, this is written by Chris Columbus, by the way. I didn't bring that up. Like, if in case you're wondering, like, what did Chris Columbus do before he was writing and he wrote Gremlins. Cool. So the eventual director of things like Home Alone and Jumanji and the first 2 Harry Potter films, he also wrote Gremlins. So there you go. Maybe that's one of the reasons why the first film works on any level. But yeah, there were totally. It's been years since I've seen Gremlins, and there were a couple things that I forgot about, but not too many. I literally forgot he had a father, basically, and I forgot there was a little boy that like led him to the shop. I literally I had Billy doing all that. I had Billy going to a shop and then getting the gremlin in my mind, getting Gizmo in my mind. That was how the film began. So color me shocked to find out that my mind has re-edited this film. And the audio description I had to fill in. The audio description here is fine. It's just like having it's been some years since I've seen Gremlins. It's one of those films where I saw a lot as a kid, but not too much since then. And yeah, I do remember like the specificity of the design of each gremlin, and that's really hard to convey. So oftentimes you just have to go with a really instant definitive way of saying, so you get something like the striped gremlin or the spiky gremlin, or you know what I'm saying? Like you come up with something that's just instantly definable to try to get that across. But it's one of those things that just isn't. It doesn't. I don't know how it translates. Extended audio description, but then you'd have to do it for like 100 gremlins. So I don't know that this is ever just gonna fully translate. I just don't know. Like it's. I kind of felt the same about WALL-E when I watched it. As a huge fan of WALL-E, it's like one of my top 5 favorite films of all time. It's like it's really hard to explain what it's like watching this silent WALL-E character and every time he makes a little movement, like the audio description would have to be so on top of it. Like anytime his neck moved, like he lifts his eyebrows, he's the most expressive thing you've ever seen. And it's amazing how emotionally wrapped up you can get in that story as a result of this robot that really only says one thing the whole movie. Eva! WALL-E, Eva! Like it's basically the whole communication in this film is I'm just saying their names. But yeah, it didn't have the same effect because I couldn't see his little emotions. And then when you see how expressive he is, and then towards the end, when it goes for the emotional gut punch and suddenly he's not expressive at all, you're like, oh shit. And that's why Wall-E made me cry every single time. And I noticed that the first time when I was blind, I didn't cry. It didn't get me there. And I've cried every time. I've seen Wall-E like 10 times, and I cry every time at that. And it's like, I know it's coming. I'm like, I'm not going to cry now. I've seen this too many times. And I'm like, if I can cry anyway. So the first time was my first time watching it as a blind person. So yeah, some things just they don't translate well. And the Gremlins, it's like, how do you really describe each one in any sort of like reasonable audio description? Like I said, the only way that you could do that is to have like literally a companion track to this that breaks down every single gremlin in the entire film, which would be insane. That'd be insane. That would be insane, because then you'd have to like be like, in this scene, from this scene, you have this gremlin and this, and because they're all in these different scenes. Anyway, so I don't expect, there's something that just has to be like a reasonable expectation, and that's an unreasonable expectation, I think. So anyway, Gremlins. I'm gonna give that. I don't think it's a desert island movie. I think the fact that I've made it like 15 years without seeing Gremlins just is an indication of the fact that I can't say it's a desert island movie for me. I want it to be, though. I watched this movie again and I was like, man, I missed this movie in my life. So I almost want to say A plus here and say it should have been a desert island movie, because immediately, like, once I got past the parts where I was like, I forgot that existed. I forgot about that. Then I was like, oh, I'm back in it. But then I kind of missed little parts of like the individuality of each one of the gremlins and the character design that goes into each one of them, because they all look completely different. He doesn't just spawn like a whole bunch of gremlins that look exactly the same. And Gizmo's fucking adorable. It should say that like every single time you have an opportunity, it should be like, Gizmo, who's adorable. But anyway, I'm gonna give Gremlins an A. It feels like it could be a desert island A plus, but I'm just gonna go with an A. I feel like it's a classic film. I know, like on IMDb, we debate it. There are some people out there who I'm sure just don't like Gremlins and don't get Gremlins. I do get Gremlins, and I love Gremlins. And it's a great way to start off spooky season with a not really a spooky film, but a nice intro. It's a gateway to horror, which we're going to get into. So stick with me for spooky season. Get ready for a shit ton of reviews all over the place. Some of them will be in the dark, like great scary stories are often in the dark. And I will see you guys on the other side.